The sun had just begun to warm the cracked earth around the little village when Isabella opened her eyes. Dust motes danced in the pale light that slipped through the rough wooden slats of her window. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft clatter of her mother's broom in the next room. Each morning, her mother rose before dawn to clean the big houses on the hill, leaving only a small tin room for Isabella and her baby brother Matteo. Despite the chill in the air, Isabella hugged her thin blanket close and tried to imagine what lay beyond the dusty road at the edge of town. She slipped quietly from her bed and padded across the hard-packed dirt floor to where a single wooden stool held the family's few belongings: a battered tin mug, dented plate, and a small gift-wrap package that she had never been allowed to open. On the wall, a faded photograph showed her mother in a bright dress, smiling with a group of schoolgirls at the front of a tall building. In the picture, the girls wore neat uniforms and carried clean satchels. Isabella traced the edge of the photo with her finger. Her mother had once been a student there, but long ago, when life had turned hard for their family, she had to leave school and start working to earn money. Every night, Isabella dreamed she could join that group of girls again, that she could learn to read and write alongside them. Her stomach growled. The tin mug stood empty. Isabella opened the thin curtain and stepped outside. The sun spread warm light across the courtyard of bare earth. Chickens scratched for scraps, and a neighbor's cow lowed softly. Isabella made her way to the small well at the center, looking for water to wash her face. She dipped her palm into the cold, clear water and splashed her face, feeling the jolting freshness chase away the last bits of sleep. She stared at her reflection in the rippling water, noticing the dark curls that fell across her forehead and the hope in her wide brown eyes. Across the road, a group of boys and girls in crisp uniforms laughed and ran toward the school bus. Their laughter was bright like birdsong. Isabella watched them from the shadow of the well. She felt a familiar ache in her chest. She longed to run beside them, to lift her hand in answer when the teacher called the roll. But her mother could not pay the school fee, nor buy her a uniform or books. Even the small cost of a simple exercise book was far beyond what they could afford. Isabella's mother, Rosa, appeared at the low doorway of their tin room. She held a worn broom, her arms lean with work. When she saw Isabella at the well, she offered a tired smile. "You up early again?" she said softly. "Go, little one. Finish your chores before I leave." Isabella nodded and hurried back inside. She swept the floor, careful to catch every scrap of dust. Then she scoured the battered cooking pot, using water she fetched from the well. All the while, Rosa watched with gentle eyes that carried both love and sorrow. The work was never ending, and the small wages her mother earned barely covered rent and food. Once the chores were done, Isabella slipped out again, clutching her favorite rag doll to her chest. The doll's hair was frayed, and one button hung loose, but Isabella treasured her more than any toy. She sat beneath a scraggly acacia tree at the edge of the yard and imagined the doll walking with her to school, carrying a tiny satchel of her own. In her mind, the classroom was bright, full of wooden desks polished to a warm glow. She saw herself raising her hand, eager to learn new words, to solve sums, to hold a school book and feel its crisp pages under her fingers. A sudden roar rumbled down the road, and the world shifted from dream to reality. Isabella looked up as a sleek black car slowed by the edge of the village lane. The paint gleamed like polished stone, and the tires kicked up a gray cloud of dust. Children scattered, some peeking from behind fences, others dashing away to mind their chores. Isabella's heart pounded as she stared at the shiny vehicle. It had never come this close before. The car door opened with a soft hiss, and a tall young man dressed in crisp clothes stepped out. His shoes shone, and a pair of dark sunglasses rested over his eyes. He carried a small leather bag in one hand and glanced around as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere all at once. His calm presence made the dusty village seem even smaller. Isabella felt a flutter of excitement. She had never seen anyone like him before, a stranger who looked neither tired nor worried, but sure of himself. The man walked slowly toward the well. Rosa emerged from the house to greet him, wiping her hands on her skirt. She spoke in hushed tones that Isabella could not hear. The man nodded, his gaze kind but distant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins, handing them to Rosa with a gentle smile. Rosa's eyes widened with gratitude. She bowed her head and gathered the coins close, clutching them like a precious gift. Isabella crept closer, her doll tucked safely under her arm. She watched as the man turned and touched the dusty earth with the tip of his shoe, studying the ground as if it told a story. Then he looked up at the small girl standing before him. Their eyes met. Isabella's throat went dry. She felt the ache in her chest turn sharp and real. All at once, she knew she had to speak, or her chance might slip away like water through her fingers. She swallowed hard and took a small step forward. "Sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The word seemed strange on her tongue, but necessary. The man bent slightly, bringing his face closer to hers. Isabella felt the heat of his gaze. She lifted the rag doll and held it out. "Please," she said, "take me to school." The man blinked. For a moment, he said nothing. The dust swirled around their feet, and the wind whispered through the acacia leaves. Birds settled on the branches, quieting their calls. Isabella held her breath. She heard her own heart thumping so loudly, it seemed to echo in the hush. Nearby, children stopped to watch. Even Rosa stood still, her broom forgotten in her hands. The man's lips curved in a small, gentle smile. He glanced at Rosa, then back at Isabella. Isabella thought she saw surprise in his eyes, and maybe something else, a spark of understanding. She remembered something her teacher had said once: "If you never ask, you will never know." She had asked, and now she waited. The moment seemed to stretch forever, like the long road winding out of the village. Then the man reached out and offered his hand. Isabella's heart soared. She placed her small hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip. He lifted her up, and she felt a rush of joy as her feet left the ground. Dust swirled beneath them like tiny clouds of hope. As he led her toward the car, Isabella turned back once and saw Rosa wipe a tear from her eye. Mother's look was full of pride and worry at the same time. Isabella gave a small wave, and her mother nodded. Then they were both gone, carried forward on the promise of something new. Inside the car, Isabella sat on the soft leather seat and stared out the window as the dusty huts of her village grew smaller behind them. The road stretched ahead in smooth gray lines, leading to places she had only dreamed about. She hugged her doll tight, feeling her heart swell with excitement. The man glanced at her through the rearview mirror and nodded. Isabella smiled back, her eyes shining. In that moment, the world beyond her dusty home felt boundless. She did not know where the road would lead, but she knew she would go forward. With hope and courage, she whispered to her doll, "We're going to school." And as the car rolled on toward the city, Isabella closed her eyes and let herself believe that dreams could come true. ChatGPT said, "The morning sun climbed higher as Adrian led Isabella toward the edge of the dusty road." Her small hand felt safe in his strong grip. He had closed the car door behind them, wiping a finger across the leather seat to smooth a wrinkle. Isabella sank into the cushion, her legs dangling above the floor. She looked up at Adrian through wide, curious eyes.
"Oh."
He offered her a smile so gentle it felt like sunlight on her skin. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice soft but confident. Adrian glanced at the rearview mirror, catching the sparkle in her eyes. "School," he said, as though the word itself carried magic. "I want to make sure you get a chance to learn." Isabella's heart leaped. She had prayed for just such a day in her dreams. "But how?" she whispered. Adrian smiled again and rested a hand on the steering wheel. "I know the headmistress of a school in the city," he explained. "I grew up going there on a scholarship. It changed my life. I want you to have that same chance." Isabella's chest tightened with hope and relief. "I thank you," she said, her small voice quivering. She pressed her rag doll close, as though sharing the secret. They drove along the winding road, the village fading behind them. Tall buildings rose in the distance, their windows reflecting the bright sky. Each turn brought new sights. Street vendors selling fruit from wooden carts, women in colorful dresses calling out prices, groups of children weaving through traffic to get to class. Isabella pressed her face against the window, trying to drink it all in. Adrian watched her, mindful that this was new territory. He had spent his days building companies and attending meetings, not escorting a barefoot girl to school, yet something deep inside told him this was the most important journey he had ever made. They reached the school gates, an iron fence painted white, with a sign in neat letters, St. Mary's Academy. Uniformed students clustered near the entrance, their voices rising in a cheerful chorus. Uniforms were crisp blue shirts and dark skirts or trousers. Isabella's old dress felt thin and worn in comparison. Adrian parked by the side of the road. Isabella climbed out, her shoes clicking on the pavement. Other children stared at her dirty bare feet. She felt a pinch of shame and looked down. At the ground, Adrian noticed and knelt beside her. From his pocket, he withdrew a pair of shiny black shoes, polished and new. "Here," he said, helping her into them. He then handed her a folded set of blue and white fabrica, complete uniform. Isabella's eyes brimmed with tears. "Put these on," he whispered. She hurried into a quiet corner behind the car and slipped out of her worn dress. Adrian, in a watchful school guard, held the new uniform open. Isabella's heart fluttered as she buttoned the shirt and adjusted the skirt. Everything fit perfectly. She felt as though she were stepping into a brand new life. When she emerged, the guard greeted her with a nod. Isabella's cheeks burned as she saw the other children's eyes on her. But then one girl broke into a friendly smile and waved. Another child offered to show her to class. Isabella took a deep breath and walked forward, Adrian at her side. They entered a wide courtyard flanked by tall trees. Students laughed and chatted as bells rang. Adrian guided Isabella to the principal's office, a bright room with polished floors and tall windows. The principal, Mrs. Delgado, looked up from her desk and blinked at the sight of the dusty girl now dressed in uniform, standing with a stranger in expensive clothes. She stood and offered her hand. "Good morning," Mrs. Delgado said warmly. "How may I help you?" Adrian eased a small leather briefcase from the car and set it on the desk. He explained, "This is Isabella. Her family cannot afford school fees. I was a scholarship student here and want to help cover her costs. And more, if possible, there are many other children in her village who need this chance." Mrs. Delgado's eyes shone. She opened a drawer and pulled out forms. "We will find space," she said. "I will waive all fees for her and work with you to set up a scholarship fund. You are welcome to visit any time." Isabella held her breath as Mrs. Delgado stamped papers and signed forms. At last, she handed the documents to Adrian. "Welcome to St. Mary's Academy, Isabella. You start today." Relief and joy flooded Isabella's face. She spun around, her new skirt flaring, and ran out into the courtyard. Adrian watched through the window as she joined a group of girls who showed her where to line up for assembly. He felt a warmth in his chest he had never known. Standing in that office, he had done more than write a check. It opened a door. After the assembly, the students filed into bright classrooms. Adrian followed Isabella to her classroom, peeking over her shoulder at the colorful posters and rows of desks. The teacher, Miss Rivera, greeted them with a smile. She introduced Isabella and explained she would sit next to a friend named Maria, who handed Isabella a pencil and notebook. Isabella's fingers trembled as she wrote her name at the top of the page, Isabella Romero. Adrian stayed long enough to see Isabella answer a question about letters and numbers. She spoke softly but clearly. The other children watched her with curiosity and then with respect, as though her very presence was proof that dreams could come true. Miss Rivera nodded at Adrian and mouthed, "Thank you." Adrian turned and slipped out of the room, his heart full. He ducked down a hallway, lined with student artwork and photographs of past graduates. His own picture was on the wall. He was that boy who returned as a successful alumnus to support others. He paused in front of it, running his hand over the glass. He thought of everything he had been through, the struggles as a child, the nights spent reading by candlelight, the promise he had made to himself that education would be the gift he shared. As he made his way to the car, he noticed a small crowd gathering outside. A local reporter from a community newspaper took notes, asking quick questions. Adrian answered simply, "Every child deserves a chance." The reporter snapped photos, capturing the moment when a billionaire became a champion for the poor girl he had met on the road. Back in the car, Adrian started the engine. Isabella climbed in, her face alight. "I learned my letters," she said proudly. "And we sang a song about the alphabet." Adrian grinned. "That's wonderful." Isabella leaned forward. "Will you come again?" she asked. He nodded. "I will," he promised. "But you must promise to work hard and help others when you can." She clasped her hands together. "I promise." Her eyes glowed with determination. They drove back toward the village, the city lights fading into dust and fields. Isabella did not speak until they reached her home. Then she turned to Adrian and said, "Thank you. You gave me a chance I only dreamed of." Adrian felt a lump in his throat. He knelt by the car window and looked into her shining eyes. "We earned it," he said softly. "Remember that." Isabella hugged her doll close. "I will," she whispered. Adrian watched her run into her mother's arms. Rosa had tears in her eyes and held Isabella so tight it took her breath away. Adrian handed Rosa a small envelope. Inside was the first installment of funds for the scholarship program. Rosa stared at the envelope, then at him, unable to find words. She bowed her head and said simply, "Thank you." As Adrian drove away, he felt the world had shifted on its axis. The promise he made on a whim had set in motion something powerful. He knew the road ahead would be long, raising funds, building partnerships, expanding to reach more villages. But he felt ready. For the first time in his life, success meant more than profit. It meant opening doors, igniting hope, and changing lives one barefoot girl at a time. Sunlight fell soft on the schoolyard as Isabella stood in her crisp uniform, her new shoes gleaming in the light. The air buzzed with chatter and laughter as students moved toward their classrooms. Isabella's heart pounded with excitement and a touch of nervousness. Her doll was tucked safely in her satchel now, peeking out like a quiet friend. Adrian stood beside her at the gate, watching the children stream past. He felt the weight of his promise settle warmly around his shoulders. Isabella took a small breath and stepped forward, clutching Adrian's hand for a moment before letting go. She walked toward Miss Rivera, her classroom teacher, who smiled and pointed to a row of desks near a window. Isabella found the seat and arranged her notebook and pencil carefully on the polished wood. She sat up straight, her back firm against the chair, determined to make the most of this chance. Adrian lingered at the door. Miss Rivera nodded and beckoned him in. He crossed the threshold quietly. The classroom was bright, walls painted a soft yellow, covered with posters of letters, numbers, and pictures of famous scientists, authors, and leaders. Isabella's gaze traveled from one to the next: Newton's apple tree, Maya Angelou's gentle face, Martin Luther King Jr. standing in front of a sea of people. She wondered if the posters could hear her thoughts and cheer for her. Miss Rivera introduced Isabella to the class. "Class, this is Isabella Romero. She will join us from today on a full scholarship, thanks to a kind friend." A ripple of applause rose from the students. Some clapped slowly, unsure of how to welcome her. Others raised their pens and gave small waves. Isabella's cheeks warmed, and she offered a shy nod. A boy with a bright smile said, "Welcome, Isabella." Isabella whispered thank you, and Jamal scooted over to let her share his desk. Adrian watched from the back as Isabella settled in. Miss Rivera began the lesson with a greeting in English and the local language, teaching a simple rhyme about the alphabet. A is for apple, B is for ball. The children sang along, some voices trembling, others clear and confident. Isabella closed her eyes and joined in. She felt the rhyme roll off her tongue like a small victory. When the class finished, Miss Rivera asked volunteers to sound out letters on a large chart. Hands shot up across the room. Isabella hesitated, then raised her hand. The teacher selected her, and Isabella walked to the front. She pointed to the letter C and said, "C is for cat." The class smiled and clapped. Isabella felt her chest swell with a fierce joy. After letters, the lesson moved to simple sums. Miss Rivera wrote 2 + 3 = on the board. Many children scribbled answers. Isabella copied the problem into her notebook, drew 2 circles and 3 more, then wrote 5. She felt the satisfaction of solving something new. When Miss Rivera checked, she nodded and said, "Well done." The glow in Isabella's eyes was brighter than the morning sun. Adrian slipped out of the room, his mind buzzing. He walked down a corridor lined with student artwork. He paused at a painting of a tree made of handprint seech leaf, a different color. He thought of his own childhood, drawing pictures under a kerosene lamp because electricity was a dream. Now these bright classrooms had ceiling fans, computers, and even a small library. He walked toward the school library, a quiet room filled with shelves of books. He ran his finger along the spine stories of adventure, science, poetry. He picked up a simple book on animals and flipped through the pages. Lions, elephants, dolphins, each image more vivid than the last. He remembered how books had opened his world as a boy. Back in the classroom, a bell rang for recess. Students rushed into the courtyard, laughing and playing. Isabella joined a group of girls who taught her a skipping game. She laughed as they swung the rope, and she hopped in time. Her uniform skirt swirled around her knees. For a moment she forgot the dusty road and the chores at home. She was just a child playing under tall trees, her heart light. Adrian watched from the school entrance. A local reporter approached, her notebook open. "Mr. Adrian Singh," she said, "your gesture has inspired many. How do you feel seeing Isabella so happy?" Adrian smiled and replied, seeing her. "Learn today reminds me of the power of opportunity. Education changes lives." The reporter scribbled quickly, snapping photos as students played behind them. Recess ended, and students filed back inside. Isabella returned to her desk, her cheeks still flushed with joy. She opened her notebook and began copying a poem about friendship. The words were new but familiar. A friend is someone who holds your hand even when the road is hard. She thought of Adrian, her new friend, and her mother waiting at home. She wrote slowly, each letter a promise. Meanwhile, Adrian met with Mrs. Delgado, the principal, in her office. The desk was covered in papers and pictures of alumni who had gone on to university and careers. Mrs. Delgado spoke with enthusiasm about expanding the scholarship fund. "There are dozens of children like Isabella," she said, "many bright. Minds lost for lack of resources." Adrian nodded, pulling out a checkbook. "Let's start with the first 10 scholarships," he said, "and I will work with you to raise more funds. I want this to be sustainable." They discussed details: tuition, fees, uniforms, transportation for students in remote areas. Adrian sketched ideas on a notepad: monthly stipends for families, lunchtime meals at school, weekend tutoring sessions. Mrs. Delgado took notes, her eyes shining. "You're not just helping students, you're helping an entire community." Adrian leaned back, feeling a sense of purpose, stronger than any boardroom deal. In the late afternoon, classes ended. Children gathered their satchels and said goodbye to teachers. Isabella packed her notebook and pencil case, her new books tucked carefully in her bag. She looked for Adrian among the crowd. When she spotted him, she ran forward and hugged him tightly. He laughed and lifted her off the ground, careful of her delicate frame. She babbled about how she had learned a new song, how she had counted to 10, how she had made a friend named Maria. Adrian listened, his smile soft. They walked to the car together. Isabella hopped into the back seat and pulled out her notebook. Showing Adrian the letters and numbers she had written, he leaned forward and pointed to one page. "This is very good," he said. Isabella beamed. "I want to be a teacher one day," she said between breaths. Adrian's heart warmed at her words. "It can be anything you dream," he said, "and I will help you reach that." The drive back to the village was quiet. Isabella leaned against the window, her eyes heavy with tiredness. Adrian watched her in the rearview mirror, his mind replaying her bright laughter. When they reached her home, Rosa waited at the door, her broom in hand. Her face lit up at the sight of Isabella in uniform. Rosa opened the car door and helped her daughter out. Isabella turned to Adrian and said, "Thank you for today." She hugged his leg gently. "Promise you'll come again?" she asked. Adrian knelt beside her and took her small hand. "I promise," he said. And tomorrow and every day until you no longer need me." Rosa stared at them, tears glistening. Adrian handed her an envelope, explaining it contained funds for the next month's fees, plus a little extra for supplies. Rosa bowed her head, unable to speak at first, then said, "God bless you." Adrian smiled and waved goodbye before driving away. That night, Isabella lay in bed, clutching her doll. She whispered, "We did it." She thought of the classroom, the schoolyard, the friendly faces, and the promise of a future beyond the dusty road. She drifted to sleep with a smile, her dreams filled with letters dancing across pages. Adrian returned to his city office, the evening lights reflecting on his desk. He unpacked the papers from St. Mary's Academy and placed them in a folder labeled Scholarship Project. He opened his laptop and sent an email to friends and colleagues, sharing Isabella's story and inviting them to support the fund. He typed, "Education is the gift we can all give. Join me in changing lives." He paused before hitting send. Thinking of the barefoot girl who had asked for a ride, he realized that a simple yes could ripple out, touching far more than one life. As the city lights blinked on around him, Adrian felt a new mission guiding his steps. Tomorrow, he would return to St. Mary's. But tonight, he would imagine all the possibilities ahead. Classrooms filled with eager faces, notebooks brimming with words, children running toward dreams once out of reach. And at the center of it all was Isabella, shining in her uniform, a symbol of hope and a promise of what could happen when someone dared to care. The sun rose over the village and bathed the small houses in golden light. Isabella raced down the dirt path, clutching her school bag. Today was special. She would walk to school with not just Adrian, but with 2 other children he had invited. As she passed her mother's doorway, Rosa called out, "Be safe, my love." Isabella waved and ran on. At the edge of the village, Adrian waited beside his sleek car. Next to him stood 2 shy children, Diego and Anna. Diego was 9, with a bright smile hiding his worries. Anna was 8, her hair tied in neat braids. Both had stood by dusty roads, watching school buses drive past. Today, they would ride with Adrian to St. Mary's Academy, just as Isabella had. Isabella greeted them with a cheer. Diego's eyes lit up, and Anna offered Isabella a timid wave. Adrian knelt and handed each child a fresh uniform and a pair of shoes. Their faces glowed as they changed behind the car. When they emerged in crisp blue shirts and dark skirts, they looked like any other students. Isabella gripped Adrian's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian smiled. "You're welcome." The drive felt like a parade of hope. The children pointed at the bright city buildings and asked questions about the tall towers they saw. Adrian answered them, his voice warm and calm. "This city was once my home when I went to school," he said. "Now it will be yours too." The children gazed out the windows, imagining all that awaited them. At St. Mary's gates, a small group of village parents gathered. They had heard from Rosa and the local shopkeeper that Adrian was offering spots at the school. Their hearts pounded with hope and fear. What if there were not enough places? What if the fees were too high? But when they saw Adrian step from the car, shaking hands and greeting them with respect, their worries eased. Inside the principal's office, Mrs. Delgado welcomed the new students and their parents. She spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "Thanks to Mr. Adrian Singh, we have space for 10 more students from this village," she announced. Gasps rose from the crowd. Mothers cupped their mouths. Fathers nodded in disbelief. Adrian stepped forward and added, "This is only the beginning. I plan to support a whole class of 20 children by next year. Together, we will create a fund to cover uniforms, books, and lunches. No child will be left behind." Tears of joy rolled down Rosa's cheeks as she heard Adrian's words. She squeezed Isabella's hand. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Diego's mother hugged him tight, and Anna's father patted her on the head. The parents looked at Adrian with gratitude shining in their eyes. Had known hardship, but in this moment, they saw a path forward. Word of the program spread quickly. The village shopkeeper posted the news on his small bulletin board. The local market buzzed with talk. "Have you heard?" women whispered while bargaining over tomatoes. "He is truly helping our children." Even the elder at the community center made an announcement during the midday gathering. As people left, they carried whispers of hope with them. Adrian spent the rest of the day meeting with village leaders. He arranged simple monthly meetings where parents could discuss the program. He listened to their needs. Some children lived far from the main road and needed a bus stop closer. Others needed extra tutoring to catch up. Adrian took notes. He promised to add a van service, to hire a tutor for after-school lessons, and to set aside funds for school supplies. Each promise was met with smiles, nods, and sometimes tears. Back at his office that evening, Adrian opened his laptop and drafted a simple website for the scholarship fund. He uploaded Isabella's photo. In her uniform, alongside Diego and Anna, he wrote in clear, warm language, "We believe in every child's dream." He added a donation button and a message inviting friends and colleagues to join. Within hours, messages poured and some people offered to volunteer, others to donate. The tiny seed he had planted was growing fast. Meanwhile, in the village, Isabella continued her studies with a new group of friends. She spent her afternoons tutoring Diego in reading and helping Anna practice her handwriting. They sat under the acacia tree, the same one where Isabella once dreamed of school. Now their notebooks lay open, pages filled with letters and sums. Laughter rose like birdsong as they took turns reading simple stories aloud. One afternoon, a team from a local newspaper arrived. They carried cameras and notebooks. The reporter approached Rosa and asked her to share her story. Rosa spoke with quiet strength, her words simple and true. "I only wanted my children to learn. Now they can. I am grateful." The photographer captured Isabella helping Anna write her name. That image would appear in the next day's paper. A portrait of change. As the sun set, children returned home through the village lanes, their steps light. Some waved to neighbors who cheered for them. Diego's mother watched from her doorway, pride shining in her eyes. Anna's father joined Rosa and Isabella at their small courtyard gate. They shared a cup of tea and talked of dreams once hidden. And now possible? Adrian visited the village every week. He oversaw the pickup van and checked on the children's progress. He met with tutors and the school principal, reviewing reports and discussing improvements. Each time he arrived, children ran to greet him with hugs and laughter. Isabella would lead the group, her bright eyes sparkling with pride. One morning, the children surprised Adrian with handmade thank you cards. Each card was decorated with bright colors and hopeful messages. "Thank you for my uniform. Thank you for my school. Thank you for my future." Adrian's eyes misted as he read them. He knelt down and thanked each child by name. "You inspire me," he said. "Keep learning, and you will change the world." Word reached a television station in the city. The news crew joined the scholarship. Team in the village, filming children boarding the van, parents waving goodbye, and Adrian talking with tutors. The story aired that evening, showing viewers how one person's kindness could transform a community. Messages of support came from other towns. Some viewers asked how they could start similar programs. Adrian's simple promise had become a guiding light for many. The weeks that followed, the scholarship fund accepted its first corporate donation. A local business pledged to match individual donations. Another private foundation offered to support transportation costs. The idea of a single girl's plea evolving into a village-wide movement spread like wildfire. Isabella grew more confident each day. She sat proudly in class, answering questions, reading aloud, and helping her friends. She no longer felt like the barefoot girl at the road's edge. She felt like a part of a family, one bound by learning and hope. One evening after the last, children had gone home. Adrian stood beneath the acacia tree and looked around. The branches rustled in the warm breeze. Paper lanterns hung from the limbs, gifts from parents to celebrate the program's first month. Each lantern bore a child's name, painted in bright colors. They glowed softly in the twilight, like stars come down to earth. Adrian smiled and whispered to the tree, "We did this together." He thought of Isabella's simple plea, made possible by courage and a willingness to listen. He realized that real change began when we open our hearts and minds to others' dreams. As the lanterns swayed, children's laughter and voices drifted from nearby homes. The village, once quiet and dusty in the mornings, now buzzed with possibility. Mothers spoke of writing poems with their daughters. Fathers read math problems with their sons. Grandparents told stories of what school meant to them and what it could mean to the next generation. That night, Adrian returned to his city home with a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He knew the road ahead would bring challenges managing funds, scaling the program, ensuring every child received support, but he faced them with confidence. The village had shown him that hope, once sparked, could light the darkest corners. In his dreams, he saw Isabella standing by the acacia tree, her eyes bright as lanterns, her smile wide and brave. He promised himself he would keep her dream alive in the dreams of every child he could reach. For in their hopes, he had found his own purpose, and in their success, he would find his greatest reward. ChatGPT said. The morning light crept through the curtains as Isabella woke with a flutter in her chest. Today was the day of the village celebration. A big banner hung between the two acacia trees. Welcome to our future. Colorful ribbons and paper flowers decorated every fence post. The children stared at the mirror-like windows of their uniforms and smiled. They had learned so much since their first day at St. Mary's Academy. Now they would share their joy with the whole village. Isabella slipped on her uniform and polished her shoes until they shone. She tucked her notebook into her satchel and found her rag doll, now dressed in a tiny school vest that she and Anna had sewn with scraps of cloth. She placed the doll gently on the passenger seat of Adrian's car. He arrived soon after, his eyes bright as the children climbed in. Today, he would see the full measure of what had been built. Not just a few scholarships, but a living community of learners. When they reached the village gate, a chorus of cheers greeted them. Parents and grandparents lined the road, clapping and smiling. Some held small bouquets of wildflowers. The air smelled of fresh bread and frankincense, thanks to the morning stalls set up for the celebration. Isabella hopped down and ran to join her friends. Diego waved a ribbon baton in the air. Anna carried a stack of handmade invitations for the Elder Council. All around, children practiced songs they had learned in music class. Songs about hope, songs about change. Adrian stepped out and greeted Rosa first. She hugged him fiercely, tears in her eyes, but a broad smile on her face. "Look at them," she whispered. "They are happy." Adrian nodded, his voice thick. "You all earned this." He turned to the children, kneeling to meet their eyes. "Today is your day," he said. "Show the village what you can do." Isabella's group formed a small choir near the stall where the school van usually waited. Miss Rivera and two tutors stood by with instruments: a simple drum, a xylophone made of metal bars, and a few wooden flutes. The choir's first song was the poem Isabella had copied months ago. A friend is someone who holds your hand, even when the road is hard. Their voices rang pure and strong, filled with the pride of every hard-won lesson. The village hush fell, as if even the wind paused to listen. After the song, the children performed a short play they had written themselves. It told the story of a barefoot girl who asked a stranger for help and found a path to learning. Isabella played herself, stumbling through the act at first, then finding confidence as the drama unfolded. Adrian watched from a wooden bench, his heart swelling. When the final scene showed Isabella alone in class, smiling at a blackboard full of letters, the audience erupted in applause. Next, the village elders offered speeches. The community leader spoke of how education would break the cycle of poverty. A young father, once a school dropout, described how he saw his daughter's bright future and felt hope for his own life. Each speech ended with the same promise: to support the children, to keep learning alive in the village, and to honor the gift Adrian had planted by nurturing it together. Then came a demonstration of skills, a simple math contest, spelling bees, and art displays. Ego solved sums on a chalkboard faster than many older students. Anna spelled long words with careful enunciation. Others presented drawings of science projects, a model of the solar system made from painted stones. A picture story of water's journey from well to glass. Isabella guided visitors through the displays, explaining each child's work with warmth and pride. She felt like a teacher, sharing knowledge and inspiring others. When the village cook handed out cups of sweet porridge, flavored with cinnamon and honey, the children lined up patiently. They ate their treats in the shade of the acacia trees, their futures stretching out like the golden fields beyond the village. Parents spoke in low voices, planning how they would continue to support the program. Some offered to babysit younger siblings so older children could focus on studies. Others volunteered to raise funds at the market next week by selling crafts made by the school's art club. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Adrian gathered everyone together for one final moment. He stood on a small wooden crate and held up his hand for silence. "This day belongs to you," he said. "Every laugh, every song, every answer you gave today belongs to you. And it belongs to this village." He paused, looking at Isabella and her friends. "But this work does not end. It grows every day you open your books and ask questions. It grows every time you help someone else learn." Isabella stepped forward and took the microphone he offered. Her voice rang out clear and steady. "Thank you, Mr. Adrian," she said. "Thank you for believing in us. We will work hard. We'll help each other. We will make this promise real." The crowd cheered again, louder than before. Even the birds seemed to join in, swooping and calling across the sky. As the celebration wound down, families gathered in small groups under lantern-lit tables. They shared stories of what the children had told them about the city, about computers and libraries and teachers who encouraged questions. They talked of hopes for future school trips to the capital, of debates and science fairs. The village, once tied by hardship, now pulsed with shared dreams. In the glow of evening, Adrian and Rosa walked together beneath the acacia trees. Paper lanterns swung gently above them. Rosa turned to Adrian and said, "You changed our world." He shook his head and smiled. "No," he said, "you did." She looked at him, puzzled. "We gave the children the will to learn. They gave us the work to do." He placed a hand on the tree trunk, where the first lanterns still glowed. "This was a seed. You and I watered it, but the whole village will make it bloom." Later, as stars appeared in the clear sky, Isabella sat with her mother and siblings around a small fire. She recounted every moment of the day in quick breathless words: her song, the play, the math contest, helping guests understand her drawings. Rosa listened, pride shining in her eyes. Matteo, her little brother, clapped his hands and pretended to sing the alphabet song. Isabella hugged him close and whispered, "One day, you will join me at school too." Adrian drove home through the silent fields, the windows down, letting the warm night air rush in. He thought of the faces he had seen, the children's bright eyes, the parents' hopeful smiles, the elders' steady nods. He knew there would be challenges ahead, making sure funds lasted, finding new partners, reaching more villages. But after today, he was certain of one thing: this work would endure. Carried forward by every hand that wrote a letter, solved a problem, or sang a song. At his city home, Adrian placed a final lantern from the celebration on his desk. Softly, a reminder of what one simple act could inspire. He opened his laptop and sent a message to the program's small team. Today was a triumph. Tomorrow, we continue. Let's build on this hope. Duh. He leaned back in his chair, thinking of Isabella's promise to help others one day. Knew she would keep it. And he knew that around the world, other children just like her were waiting for someone to ask, "Can I take you to school?" As he switched off the light and left the lantern glowing in the dark room, his heart was full. From a dusty road to a bright celebration under acacia trees, the journey had changed him as much as it had changed the village. He slept that night, knowing that true progress begins when we simply listen, say yes, and drive forward, hand in hand, toward a future we dare to believe in,